that the true fight for justice was no longer in the courts. It was an economic issue, right? That if you can teach a man and help a man and a woman to feed their family, you can change their family. If you change the family, you can change a community. If you change a community, you can change a city. And if you can change a city, you can change a country.
Those who've crossed those campuses, you know that an HBCU experience cannot be matched by anything this world has to offer. And once a year, at the end of our college festival, we bring in one of the presidents or chancellors of those HBCUs to come and share with us today. And I'm proud to present to you Dr. Michael Sorrell, who is the president of Paul Quinn College. He is, amen, a graduate. He's a graduate of Oberlin. He got his law degree from Duke University. He finished his doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania, and after working for several law firms in Dallas and working with the Clinton administration, he took over the helm of Paul Quinn College back in 2007. A struggling HBCU that under his direction, his vision, and his radical ability to change the momentum of that school, they've done some great and phenomenal things that he's going to talk about in just a moment. One of them is he took a football field and realized that Paul Quinn football team was not winning too much, not doing too well, and that land could be used for something else. And they turned it into a community garden to address the food desert in the area around Paul Quinn College so that residents could have fresh produce and all that they need for healthy living. That is a radical leader as a president of a university. To one, he is known as husband. To two, he's known as father. To many on that college campus, he's known as president. But I'm excited to have him here today for another reason as well. Back in the fall of 1991, when I was at Duke University, I made my desire known to be a good member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And after filling out my paperwork, I was put in a process to understand, Kevin, you know what it meant to be a Kappa. And on the college campus at that time in grad school, he should have been busy working on his law degree, but he decided he wanted to help us become Kappas. And seeing that we're both from the south side of Chicago, he took an affinity to me. And he liked me more than anybody else online. So some brother in here feels me. He liked it so much. I knew he had a green thumb. He gave our line, Kevin, a potted tree and a planter, and we had to carry it everywhere we went. And if ever we were found not to have that tree, or if that tree was dying, we had a lesson that evening on how to take care of the property of Big Brother Michael Sorrell late in the evening hours, that we might not interfere with our schoolwork. You understand? He is, to me, and will always be, Big Brother Mike. And I am so pleased that God has allowed our paths to cross again, not simply because we're fraternal brothers, but also because he's doing a great work through him in the kingdom. Alfred, would you do me a favor? Would you stand and help me welcome Dr. Michael Sorrell, the president of Paul Quinn College, our speaker for this Sunday morning.
Good morning, Alfred Street Baptist Church. I just want to stand here for a moment and take this in. You all look good. I mean, act like you know. You all look good. You look good in a way that reminds me of something my grandmother, Christabel Williams, used to tell me on special occasions. She'd say, "Baby boy, you in high cotton today." Right? This is a high cotton crowd. Now, my grandmother was from a little town, Louisiana, called Waterproof, Louisiana. And the rest of the family was from another smaller, not quite as small as Waterproof, but Natchez, Mississippi. There's always that one brother, right? And I think it's important that we always honor our ancestors. I grew up south side of Chicago with your pastor, but my people are from Louisiana and Mississippi. And that's important because going home was always going home. And it made me who I am, and I appreciate that, but it does not rob me of the ability to appreciate when I am in places like Alfred Street Baptist Church. Now, before we talk about Alfred Street, I want to talk about Bill Brown. Can we give him one more hand? Now, I don't know what 91 is going to look like for me. There's a couple things that I do know. I know that I will not have as much hair on my head as you have on yours. Right? I want to be clear. I'm hating on his follicle situation. I lost my battle long ago, okay? But I just want to say thank you for all that you have meant to this community, all that you have meant to our people. We need examples like you. We need examples of brothers who made it through. And you made it through things that, if we are honest, the overwhelming majority of us in here will never understand nor see. And that makes what you have done even that much more extraordinary. What also makes it extraordinary is you are sitting there with your wife. Now, in order to help make sure that I will sit there with my wife at that age, I must say hello to my wife and 2 little children who are watching us on the World Wide Web. All right, so honey, I love you. I love the kids. Can you all help me out a little bit more than that? All right, thank you very much. All right. That first response was about to have me in a whole lot of trouble when I got home. All right. But I am thrilled and excited and honored to be here at Alfred Street because of what Alfred Street Baptist Church has meant to us, right? And by that us, we could certainly talk about the United States as that version of us, but I'm talking about the us, right? The our people us, the our community us. That version of us that in the 1920s, when there was no high school curriculum for our students, the church created that curriculum. I'm talking about that us that invest $1 million in the Smithsonian so that others would see what that behavior looks like, that we support our institutions more than just showing up by giving them the resources that they need to be successful. I'm talking about that version of us that when our communities are in pain, following Trayvon Martin, following Eric Gardner, following Freddie Gray, that you stand up and model what it looks like to have strong institutions that stand up for what's right in their community, regardless of what others might think. I'm talking about the us that makes it their business to go to Flint, Michigan, which is not in the DMV. Okay, Flint, Michigan sends folks, members of the congregation out there, not just for the photo op, but for the real work. We need institutions like Alfred Street Baptist Church. We need institutions that show us the best of who we can be and what we can be. So on behalf of all of those of us out there who are learning from your example, who are following in your footsteps, I just want to say thank you for who you are today and thank you for who you have always been. And please give yourselves a hand. Now, I'm also honored to be here because of your pastor, who brought up such an ugly time. Now, I am a licensed attorney, so I'm going to have to take the fifth and not incriminate myself for perhaps allegedly participating in what some might term illegal activities. I will tell you that I don't remember anything about an alleged tree. I mean, who would do something like that? Certainly not someone that would grow up and be entrusted with the minds of our young people, right? I have a somewhat hazy recollection. It's a hazy recollection. So I just want to say that I don't know what brothers may have done that to you, but I'm angry. Right? I'm angry. Because I'm sure if they had known that you would grow up to become a man of the cloth, they might have taken a different approach. Right? But in all sincerity, I have to tell you, when you are charged with being a big brother in the alleged pledge process, it is an awesome responsibility, because if it is done correctly, allegedly, if it were ever done at all, you are investing in young men and young women. You are pouring into them. You are teaching them what a bond looks like. You hope you are inspiring them to stand up for our people, because let's be honest, our institutions, the Divine Nine, came about during a time where our people needed us. They didn't need step shows. They didn't need strolls. They needed us. They needed a band of committed individuals who understood the greater purpose. So when we participated in joining these fraternities and sororities, our hope, our dream, our expectation is that those that we were investing in would take those lessons, stand upon the shoulders of others, and do things that we ourselves could never have dreamed of. When I look at your pastor, I not only see someone who has won so many awards that to name any would be an offense to the many. I see a man who has far exceeded anything we could have possibly dreamed of when allegedly he was carrying potted plants around the campus of Duke University. I see someone who represents the best of who we can be, whose heart is for the people, it's for the work, and it's for everything that we hope that our leaders would be. And so just on behalf of all the brothers who participated in what we'll call a mentoring program, I just want to say thank you, right? Mentoring program. Just want to say thank you. I also need to recognize some friends of mine that are here. I do believe one of our fraternity brothers, Lewis Johnson, and his wife are here. Are they here? Okay. I'm sure they're in the overflow room, because I'm not going to call anybody out for not being in church. I do want to recognize a member of the congregation, Zakiya Smith, who I know is in the overflow room, because she texted me to make sure she got her credit for being in church, right? I want to say hello to my brother Ken Abram, who's here somewhere. There he is, right there. I want to thank him for being here. And I also want to recognize someone who I know you all know. Right? Henry, will you please stand up? Now, let me tell you about Henry. Henry is a Morehouse-loving, Alfred Street Baptist Church-loving black man, okay? He is an advocate for those two institutions in ways that I have never seen. Okay, I mean, I keep telling him I'm the president of Paul Quinn. And he's like, Morehouse, 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 Morehouse. what I can tell you is all of us should have people who love our institutions as deeply and as thoroughly as Henry does. And I just want to say thank you, brother, for always being a stalwart and being an advocate, and for all you do. Thank you. I also bring greetings from my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes III. At the first service, I used this whole proper name, Frederick Douglass Haynes III, and then somebody told me I was being sedity. Right? They said they know him as Freddie Haynes, so if we're all cool like that. So my pastor, Freddie Haynes from Friendship West Baptist Church, who is an amazing, amazing man of the word, and who is an enormous fan of your pastor as well. I think we have greeted everyone that I know is here. If there's someone I missed, if you stand up now and shout, I will acknowledge you as well. All right, so this is even better. This is one of my alums. All right, Jessica Wade. Now, she told me she was coming to the noon service. I had some remarks for her at the noon service, but what I'm going to tell you is she is an amazing alum of Paul Quinn College. She is one of those alums that gives her time, gives her talent, gives her resources to her alma mater, because she understands that you don't need just one of those items. You need all of those items. And she's also just an amazing woman. And please join me in congratulating her. She recently got married, and I think that is fantastic. And is your husband here? So, brother, stand up. There we go. Congratulations. I love black love. That's a shameless plug to my wife listening, right? So if you all would please stand for the scripture reading. Today's scripture reading is what we call the Quinnite Nation Bible passage. It comes to us from Isaiah, the 58th chapter, verses 9 through 12. And it reads, "Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, 'Here am I.' If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called the repairer of broken walls and the restorer of streets with dwellings." Please be seated. At the 7:15 service, we talked about repairing what's broken. And we had a very honest conversation about mental health and about the mischaracterization of history, and allowing others to mischaracterize your history as a means of discussing this movement afoot to whitewash slavery. But in this service, what I'd like to talk to you about is ask you the question, where have all the restorers gone? Where have all the restorers gone? My first career was that of the law. That is actually, as you know, how I met your pastor. I was a law student at Duke University. And I became a lawyer because I idolized Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston. By any standard, by any era, these were brilliant men. Marshall graduated first in his class at Howard University, was the first African-American Supreme Court justice, some might argue the only African-American Supreme Court justice. I'm just saying, every brother ain't a brother, okay? And now he doesn't worship here, right? Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure. You know, I know the president drops in from time to time, so I didn't want to get shuttled out of here by the Secret Service. But Thurgood Marshall also won 83% of his cases in front of the Supreme Court, which is a record that still stands today. Houston, in addition to being Marshall's professor and mentor, also was the dean of Howard's Law School and was special counsel for the NAACP. But what you might not know is he was the valedictorian of his class at Amherst College in 1911. Now, I mean, one could argue the best year ever, right? For those of you who know, you know, right? Those of you who don't know, you might be an alpha, right? So, but I'm just kidding. I love the alphas because everyone needs a rough draft, right? Come on, y'all. It's just a little brotherly humor, right? That's all we're doing. So let me get back on message, okay? Houston also was a member of the Law Review and graduated with honors from Harvard Law. These were extraordinary men. And as a young man, I was fascinated by them because of the way in which they bent the law to achieve justice. Right? These men charted a course of cases that walked the Supreme Court from Plessy v. Ferguson and the notion of separate but equal to Brown versus the Board of Education, which created the right for us to go anywhere, anytime for our educations. Now, these were extraordinary accomplishments. And I, as a young man, and even as a child, was just incredibly awed by the intellect required to think through that. But then to think through that knowing that everyone wanted you to lose. There were no friends on the court that day. There was just the letter of the law and the push towards justice. And so as I grew up, I realized that I wanted that for myself. I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. I wanted to learn how to be someone who brought hope for the hopeless. But as I grew and as I got into the study of law, I realized that it wasn't my desire to become a Supreme Court justice. It wasn't my desire to become a lawyer who just spent all their time practicing law. What I really was interested in, what would become my life's work, is this notion of justice, right? The law as a tool for creating justice. But a funny thing happened to me on my way to law school. I spent a year in between. I went to Duke before law school and got a master's in public policy. And I spent a year working for the legal services of North Carolina before I went to law school. And there I was in charge of traveling the state and negotiating agreements between community development corporations and the banks. And it was all around this idea of the Community Reinvestment Act to prevent redlining from occurring. And during that time, I came to realize something, that the true fight for justice was no longer in the courts. It was an economic issue, right? That if you can teach a man and help a man and a woman to feed their family, you can change their family. If you change their family, you can change a community. If you change a community, you can change a city. And if you can change a city, you can change a country. I wanted to change a country. I wanted to see justice being served when young people and old people alike had the ability to participate fully in this country outside the vestiges of poverty. And what we came to realize, or what I came to realize rather, is that was what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had come to understand in the last stages of his life. Now, I'm not talking about the Selma version of Dr. King. I'm not talking about the I Have a Dream version of Dr. King. Although some people would have you believe those are the only versions of Dr. King. I'm talking about the poor people's campaign, Dr. King. I'm talking about the version of Dr. King that was grittier. I'm talking about the version of Dr. King that was unpopular. Because when you start talking about redistribution of wealth, you lose a whole lot of friends. We'll give you the vote, but don't come for my money. That version of Dr. King is the version of Dr. King that is the most inspirational to me. It's also that version of Dr. King who said, and I quote, "All too many of those who live in affluent America ignore those who exist in poor America. To ignore this evil is to become an accomplice to it." That version of King also told us that he had the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. What is so revolutionary about such basic needs? Why shouldn't people have 3 meals of a day? Why shouldn't they have their minds nurtured? Why shouldn't they have freedom for their spirits? What is so wrong about that? But I have to tell you, Alfred Street, as I stand here before you today, I think about what would Dr. King think about this version of America? What would he think about a version of America where 38% of the black children were being raised in poverty, where black children are 4 times more likely than white children or Asian children to be living in poverty, where the number of impoverished white children has dipped below the number of impoverished black children for the first time since the census began collecting that information in 1974. This is despite the fact that there are 3 times more white children than there are black children. Wow. What would he think about the fact that in Dallas, Texas, where Paul Quinn College is located, 25% of all residents are living in poverty. 38% of all of our children are living in poverty. Dallas has the highest child poverty rate of any city, any major city in the country. We have the 3rd highest total poverty rate of any city in the country. What would Dr. King think about that? What do we think about the fact that when children grow up in long-term poverty, it does far more than destroy their cognitive ability or their cognitive development. It does far more than ruin their emotional development. It crushes their spirit. It robs them of hope because you sit there every day and everybody has a TV. So you sit there and you watch reality shows. You watch them and you see ostentatious displays of wealth. And you turn off the TV and you are back to being broke. What would that do to your spirit? What would that do to your sense of hope? Let me tell you what that does to your sense of hope and your sense of belief. It crushes it in a way that leaves you wondering, is there anything to live for? It leaves you without hope. And do you want to know what happens to young men and women without hope? Our prisons are filled with them. The entire prison industrial complex is built on the backs of young black and brown men and women, mostly men if we are honest, who have lost hope, whose institutions have failed them. Now, as Christians, these statistics and this reality should offend us. They should rob us of our sense of Christian security, because that's not right. That is not Christian-like. That is not the walk that Christ charted for us. We were blessed to be a blessing for others. We were tasked, we were challenged to reach down to those who need us and pull us up. If the only people you mentor wear Armani and St. John suits, you are not a Christian. You are not living up to the Christian ideal. That is not who we were taught to be. Now, I get it. 18 of you clapped, right? And you may be sitting there thinking, wait a minute, you are an HBCU president. I came to hear you talking about faculties, facilities, football classics, and bands. Okay, I get that. But that's exactly why many of our communities look like they do today. Because we don't deal with the real issues. We show up for the party, but we are nowhere to be seen for the lecture. What are we here for if we aren't going to engage in our communities? I'm going to talk about poverty and justice because poverty and justice is what we need to talk about. We are going to talk about poverty and justice because we don't have justice when we have poverty. What is the point of talking about football classics and bands if my students are going home to horrible lives? Let me tell you what poverty does. If all we do is talk about our own selfish academic pursuits, and we think that creates an A education, and then we send these students home to lives where the lights don't come on, where daddy's in jail, where your brother's in jail, where mama can't make ends meet, then we sent them home to an F life. And if I send my A student aspirations home to an F life, all I've done is create D college graduates. So HBCUs and their presidents should be talking about poverty and justice because our students are coming from communities where no one else is. And we have to stand in that gap, and we are going to stand in that gap. Now, I understand that's not the vision that many schools have for their presidents. That's not the vision that many schools have for themselves, because some of us want to recreate history. We want to act like this isn't our story. Well, let me tell you something. It is our story. Because if it is one of our story, we come from a people where that means it is all of our stories. We stand on the shoulders of people who made incomprehensible sacrifices for us to lead the lives that we do, for us to sit where we are sitting right now. They attended our institution. Look, I don't have to tell you because it looked like 75% of you all are HBCU graduates. And that is something to be proud of. Like, I am so humbled by the opportunity to be an HBCU president. Like, you have no idea what that means to me. Now, I didn't go to an HBCU, but everyone in my family who went to college went to an HBCU. Now, you know, family rivalry leads me to remind them, but I'm the only one that's been a president of an HBCU, right? I mean, you know, that's just a little, you know, intellectual swag going on, right? But the point is, it is a gift to be responsible for the education of your people. It is a gift. And if you are honest about that, you don't have an option but to stand in the places where people need you to stand. This is not so different than what Benjamin Mays did at Morehouse. This is not so different than what Charles Johnson did at Fisk. Not so different than what Mary McLeod Bethune did down at Bethune. Right? This is who we are. This is what Booker T. Washington talked about. This is what he did. And let me say this. Many people look down on Booker T. Washington. I don't. I think Booker T. Washington is a role model for the ages. Because let us understand something. Booker T. Washington was the president of Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, in the Jim Crow South. You have a different conversation when you are in the devil's lair than you do when you are in heaven. What I know about Booker T. Washington was that when his graduates couldn't get jobs, he went out and raised the money to build 200 schools so that his students could get jobs. If that is not a hero, I don't know what a hero is. If that is not a restorer, I don't know what a restorer is. Now, I understand that we've got some issues with the social aspect of what he talked about. Okay, but that doesn't rob him of the genius of what he did. It was never Booker or W.E.B., it was Booker and W.E.B. We need them both. We don't have to ignore our history. We should be proud of all of our history. And with that, let me tell you how we interpret history at Paul Quinn College. We do things a little bit different. And it starts with our ethos. Our ethos is we over me. The needs of the community supersede the wants of an individual. You don't get to be selfish at Paul Quinn College. What you have, we have. What one doesn't have, none of us has. We stand up for others who do not have the things that they need. And we are proud of that. We think everyone should abide by that. We believe in something called the 4 L's. Thank you. We believe in something called the 4 L's of Quinnite leadership. We think you have an obligation to leave places better than you found them. We think you have an obligation to live a life that matters. We think you absolutely should leave from wherever you are. But most importantly, we think you have to love something greater than yourself. Right? Now, our leadership formula for accomplishing this is relatively simple. This is what we try to do. We preach hope, we practice patience, we instill resilience, we try and teach our students entrepreneurial thought and action, and we lead with love. Now, the most important part of this is leading with love. And I wasn't always a president that understood what that meant. I became president of Paul Quinn when I just turned 40 years old. And I took over an institution that was failing, right? It was 18 months from closing, which, by the way, the board didn't tell me that when they hired me, right? And to that end, when they called to offer me the job, I should have remembered something that someone told me. When people call you and offer you a job that you didn't apply for, right? It means one of two things. A, either you are amazing. But listen, if you believe that, we need to have a whole different conversation, right? Because you are an egomaniac, all right? But more than likely, it's a job that no one else wants. But here's the thing about jobs no one else wants. Sometimes it's the Lord telling you where you're supposed to be. Paul Quinn College was the blessing next to my family of my life, right? Because it allowed a man who spent almost 10 years wandering in a desert trying to figure out what he was supposed to be doing. Now, I was blessed. If you look at my resume, you don't see a resume of someone trying to find himself. You see someone who worked in the White House, someone who represented NBA lottery picks, someone who tried to buy an NBA franchise. But what you don't see is someone that wasn't quite happy, that wasn't at peace. I walked on that campus March 27, 2007, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt peace. Now, I strongly hope that peace for you doesn't include 15 abandoned buildings. I hope that it doesn't include deficits. I hope it doesn't include walls with holes in them and angry students, alumni, and faculty. But the Lord puts you in the places where He needs for you to be. And I shed many a tear over what went on at Paul Quinn College. Because when you have a school, and at that time it was 135 years old, and you are living with the specter of death every moment of every day, and your picture will be the last picture on the wall, when you think about the fact that your school could survive Reconstruction in the South, Jim Crow, lynchings, but they couldn't survive you, that is a sobering thought. And there were dark days. There were days where people would follow me in the grocery store laughing at me, telling me we weren't ever going to make it. There were days where we were on the front page of the paper for the things that were going on at the school. There was no reason to believe that we would ever be successful. And so when we stand here today with the things I'm going to share with you, and people praise me and they talk about all the wonderful things that I've done, listen, I'm not that good. Right? Like, we have passed my ability a long time ago, right? This is the Lord, okay? This is the Lord. No, thank you. This is the Lord using me in a way that I could never have seen. And let me be honest with you. I prayed for the Lord to let me out of here. Okay, no, just listen. Come on now. Don't act like you haven't been places and you wanted out because it was hard. All right, because I don't have a problem telling you that. Okay, when you go from 550 students to 150 students in 2 years' time, when everyone is telling you that your school shouldn't exist, we got kicked out of UNCF because the other black colleges didn't want to hang out with us. Right? Oh, I just aired dirty laundry. I'm sorry. Right? My point is this. It was hard. And it taxed me. And I'm not going to act like there weren't mornings I didn't wake up and cry and get on my knees and ask the Lord why. Right? Because I did that. And I don't think it makes me weak to acknowledge that. I think it makes me strong. Thank you. Because here's the thing, if we don't acknowledge our pain, then our pain takes control of us. It consumes us. It creates a condition mentally and physically that we cannot sustain. And let me tell you something, I will not be a slave to my pain. Will not. But a funny thing happened as I was going through my pain. The Lord picked me up and put me in his arms. Now, I recognized that he had picked me up because apparently he had me the whole time. But it's a journey and it is a walk. And from that moment, and literally, I am not kidding you, from the moment I woke up one morning at 5:30, cried my eyes out, on my knees, asking the Lord, why was I going through this? From that moment where I sat there and said, Lord, I have nothing, and if you don't help me, there is no way this can work. We have done this. Right? We have done that. It was after that morning that we came up with the idea to turn our football field into an organic farm. And we took a lot of heat for terminating the football program and turning the football field into a farm because we're in Texas and we're a black college. And whether we want to admit it or not, people think that football is the way out of poverty for all black kids. Right? First of all, that's a lie. Okay? It's not. The way out of poverty is to develop your mind and develop your soul. Right? Because your mind and your soul will allow you to do things your body never could. Football didn't work for Paul Quinn College. Never mind the fact that we lost every game. And we lost every game. Okay? But how selfish are you if for 6 days a year you invite the public onto your campus to watch bad football and you're in a food desert? We were in a food desert. We are closer to a garbage dump than we are a grocery store. We are 1.5 miles from the city's garbage dump and over 3 miles from a grocery store. What does that say to a community? What does it say to a community that no one will help them? Well, you know what? Time out for people not helping them. Because our version of an HBCU is an HBCU that stands up and starts swinging and fights for the people in their community. That's what we think they're supposed to do. We have grown over 40,000 pounds of food since we converted that football field into a farm. We give away 10% of everything we grow because we think that's our responsibility. We are tithing to the community. And here's how the Lord works. Our largest customer for the farm, the Dallas Cowboys. Thank you. Now, y'all that didn't stand are Redskins fans, right? But here's the thing. We have sent more tomatoes and kale to the NFL than we ever sent football players. Right? That's what matters. But that's just one of the things we've done at Paul Quinn. When the city wanted to expand the garbage dump and turn it into the largest garbage dump in the Southwest without telling the community, without conducting an impact study, it was Paul Quinn College and our students who stood up and fought back. All right? Our students created something called the We Are Not Trash movement. All right? Now, if you know your history, yeah, we borrowed that from the Memphis sanitation workers. I am a man, right? That was our inspiration. But why shouldn't you be inspired by your history? That is, if you know your history. If you know your history, you'd be inspired by your history. So we stood up and we fought back. Our students protested the city, took on the city council and the mayor. We had 200 students enrolled that year. 200 students, and we took on the city. Because we understand something that you might know about. A little story about Gideon, right? So what we know is I will take my committed band of 300 over your wishy-washy 10,000 any day of the week, because true believers will prevail any day over those that don't believe. Our student government that year had about 8 people, won the Student Government Association of the Year award for the HBCUs that year, right? But that's not all we do. We have a really creative partnership with UT Southwestern around mental health. And I talked more about this morning earlier, but let me say this. Our students are coming out of these inner cities with tremendous mental health ailments, okay? And if we are honest with ourselves, all of our communities are struggling with mental health illnesses. All of our families are struggling with mental health illnesses. The issue is we don't talk about it. It goes undiagnosed, and it passes on from generation to generation to generation because we never took the time to address it. So what we have tried to do at Paul Quinn College is we make it safe to have that conversation. And it starts with me. There have been times in my life where I've had to go talk to counselors, where I have needed help. I needed help when my first marriage failed, right? Not because I was running around feeling like I was quote unquote crazy, because I wasn't crazy, but I was in pain. And if I didn't deal with that pain would have become my story. It would have become my narrative, and I never would have gotten out from under that pain. And if I hadn't gotten out of under that pain, I would never have the wife I have today. I would never have the children I have today. I would never have the happiness that I have today. So you have to confront your demons. You have to do it in a place that is safe. You have to do it in a place where you know people love you and are willing to stand there with you and not judge you, right? We can do so much if we would just stop judging each other. So at Paul Quinn College, all of our incoming classes now receive free mental health screening. So when you come in the door, we assess your mental health just like we assess your academic readiness, just like we assess your physical health, just like we assess your financial capability. It is just part of what we do. And this is important. It's important because when we assess it, when we talk about it, when we make it safe to talk about it, we make it safe to cure it. And when we cure it, we end cycles that desperately need to be ended. So we are proud of that. And we are proud of UT Southwestern for doing that. Now, we also understand the need to expose people to the arts. We all of us need to be inspired. And we all are inspired differently. Some of us are inspired just by coming to church every Sunday listening to pastors like yours. Some of us are inspired by the books that we read. But some of us are inspired by the arts. And somehow we have been led to believe that the arts aren't so important. If we didn't have the arts, we wouldn't have Lift Every Voice and Sing. If we didn't have the arts, we wouldn't have Romare Bearden. If we didn't have the arts, we wouldn't have Lady Sings the Blues. We wouldn't have all of the wonderful gifts and the parts that makes our culture come alive. But when we take the arts out of the schools and treat them as if they are just something nice to have, we rob the ability to connect with some child that may need that to engage them. Now, we wouldn't take football out of the schools. Well, I mean, I did, but that's a different story. We wouldn't take all of our sports out of the community because we added many other sports. We created a partnership with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. And the symphony every summer comes and plays a free concert on our campus. They build a stage outside, and on the Richard Allen Chapel lawn, people come from all over the city. It is literally up to now between 2,500 and 3,000 people. And they listen to the Dallas Symphony Orchestra play music. Now, when we started, people laughed at us, said, black people in that part of town aren't going to come hear the symphony. Like, what are you doing? Like, you need to get a band, right? Why does it always have to be either or? Why can't we have both? Because some students want classical music. So what we did, the symphony, and I have to be honest, the first couple years, attendance was light. It was really light. Let me put it like this. We didn't see anything close to this number. But that was our fault. The first night, we had it on Bible study night. That's our bad, okay? The second year, we wound up having it on the same night that the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA title. Yeah, I mean, we just had bad luck, but we stayed the course. Because one of the things that's interesting about hope is that people don't believe until they understand that it's safe to believe. Because if you have lived without for all your life, you are afraid to believe. So the third year, 1,200 people showed up. The fourth year, 2,500 people showed up. And we have been smooth sailing ever since then. Because you have to have patience. Remember, that's one of our things. We preach patience. Now, perhaps the most important thing that we have done lately is our new urban college model. And that is this. Students can't afford school. They can't. All over the country, you hear about students talking about Parent Plus loans and taking out debt and not being able to survive, right? So we did something a little different. We reduced tuition and fees by $10,000. It only costs $14,300 a year to attend Paul Quinn College. And this is how people pay for it. $5,800 comes from the Pell Grant. $5,000 comes from a work credit because we're the only and the first urban work college in the country. All of our students work 10 to 20 hours per week, but they work in jobs that are related or at least compatible with their academic pursuits. Thank you. So our students don't graduate wondering whether they're going to have jobs because they've always had jobs. And that makes a difference. We also don't charge for textbooks because whether people realize it or not, our students weren't buying the textbooks. And they weren't buying the textbooks because they weren't interested. They weren't buying the textbooks because they had to make a decision between do I buy a textbook or do I pay rent? Do I buy a textbook or do I help my mama make the car note? If you know that, how do you not do something about that? So doing this has allowed us to create an institution where our students can graduate with less than $9,000 of student debt at the end of 4 years. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I don't tell you those things to brag or boast. I'm telling you those things because I want you to understand that if we could do it, anyone could do it. We stand as an example of what's possible. Our endowment is a rounding error for Howard and I's, I'm sorry, Pastor, Dr. Every now and then that alleged scroller mentality slips in, right? But it's a rounding error for other schools. We did it because we needed to do it. We did it because our people needed us to do it. And that is really what I want to leave you with today. As you sit here, As you are clearly blessed beyond any measure of what anyone could have a reasonable expectation of being blessed, are you being a blessing to others? Are you restoring the streets, the dwellings? Are you restoring our communities? Are you living up to the Christian principles that you are here because you say you do? Are you giving back? Are you nurturing? Are you showing your institutions, your alma maters, the love all year round that you do at homecoming? Are you showing the communities that you drive by every day? Because if you live in an urban area, you are only 3 blocks from poverty. What are you doing to change that poverty? Because you can do more. All of us can do more. So as I take my seat, I want to say 2 things to you. First of all, thank you. Thank you for what you already do. Thank you for the example that you are setting. Thank you for being a blessing to others. And then I want to say thank you for what you are going to do tomorrow. Because I believe that tomorrow you are going to be better than you are today. Tomorrow you're going to do more than you did today. Tomorrow you are going to be the example which changes the world forever. And for that, I just want to say thank you.